What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the I Choose series podcast. On this episode, we are speaking with Kendall Ciesemier. She is an amazing individual, a journalist, a producer who is the founder of a nonprofit organization called Kids Caring for Kids. This was an amazing episode on so many levels. I think that we really get personal with Kendall into kind of like what goes on in her mind and her thoughts and how she's able to achieve just some amazing ways of helping other people. You could actually see this whole, unedited version on our I Choose series Facebook, and if you're not already following us on Facebook and Instagram, that's the best place to start. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself? I feel like it's been a while since you and I spoke.
Yeah.
But why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Kendall Ciesemier. I am originally from the suburbs of Chicago, so the Chicagoland area, but I'm currently living in New York City. And
Nice.
yeah, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Kids Caring for Kids, as well as
Kids Caring for Kids?
as well as
Okay.
I do some other things in my life. I just started a new job that I
Congratulations.
thank you. So I'm a journalist, and I am a producer. So I essentially tell stories for a living, as well as work on the nonprofit stuff and etc.
All that
Yeah.
cool stuff. Well, I know that you and we have a mutual friend who kind of brought us together.
Yeah, Liz.
Who thought that, I thought it was really awesome. Elizabeth's really cool.
Mhm.
And, she and I were talking, and I was sharing kind of what I was doing with the whole I Choose series and the Facebook Lives and the Instagram Lives. And she just thought that you would be an amazing guest. And then you and I had an opportunity to speak, and you shared a little bit of your story with me. And man, my heart, woo, big time stuff. So I don't want to keep everyone waiting. Why don't you jump right in? Tell us just a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I can keep going on for a very long time, so you'll have to cut me off.
I'll interrupt you every now and
Good.
then.
Okay. So I guess the best place to start my story is when I was 11. So when I was 11 years old, I saw a Oprah Winfrey Christmas special highlighting the lives of children living in sub-Saharan Africa. And she was particularly featuring children in South Africa. She had this big Christmas party, and she went into some of these kids' homes after the Christmas party and showed where they were living. And she showed these, I remember vividly this girl named Candy Sile. And she was 13 years old, and I was 11, so only 2 years older than I was. And she was living in the middle of what seemed like nowhere, with no running water and no electricity. And she was taking care of both of her siblings because both of her parents had died of AIDS. And so I had never heard of the AIDS epidemic. I had never seen that kind of extreme poverty before. I was laying in my parents' bedroom. This was like a nighttime special, watching it with them, and just was totally dumbfounded by what I was seeing. And I'd had a concept of American poverty, but I certainly had no concept of this kind of extreme poverty where children were really left to fend for themselves. And I couldn't imagine being Candy Sile. And so I just really connected with her as someone who was a very similar age. And they said on the episode that $10 could buy a uniform to help, kids go to school. And so, and that you needed a uniform to go to school. And so I thought, well, I have $10. And it was kind of a light bulb moment for me, because I knew kind of right after I'd seen that episode that I wanted to do orphans in Africa, because what do you do when you don't know what to do? You Google it. Yeah, exactly. And I found World Vision, which runs an orphan sponsorship program. And the budget for it was the $360 to sponsor or financially support a kid. And so that was the first thing I did. I was like, okay, I'm gonna find someone here that I can help. And I found this 8-year-old girl from Mauritania, and her name was Benit. And I went into my dresser drawer and grabbed out a stash of saved up birthday and Christmas money, and I stuffed it in an envelope and addressed it to World Vision. And I went to my parents' bedroom and I asked my mom for a stamp, and she's like, "What are you doing out of bed?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not telling you. Where are the stamps?" And of course, that does not fly with parents. And so they're like, "Okay, honey, like you're gonna tell me what you're doing." And so I finally told her, and then I said, "I just don't know if I should send $360 all at once or $30 each month." I had literally cash stuffed into an envelope. So obviously my parents got involved. They were like, "Okay, like let's see what this is. Like let's figure this out."
Yeah.
But their whole thing was like, "How about, we split it? That's a lot of money." And I said, "No, no, I'm not doing halvesies. Like this is my thing, parents." And so they let me do it. They let me kind of, donate my own money. And I basically, a few months later, I got a letter back from the girl I was sponsoring. And she was in school for the first time, learning how to read and add and write. And I thought, like, put magic paper in magic envelope, and it did a magical thing. It was very simple to me. And I thought, well, if I could do
Yeah.
that, I could get all of my friends to do it, because I remembered $10 is enough to buy a uniform, and uniforms in that part of the world help kids go to school. So again, like 11-year-old, very simple. It was like I just wanted to do something, and I knew that I could do something. And so at that
Yeah.
time, it became apparent that I was going to need a liver transplant, because
That
yes,
you
that
were
I
going
was
to
going to
need a
need a
liver
liver transplant,
transplant.
because I was,
And how old are you? Still 11?
yes, I'm 11. And
Okay.
it was,
And you just gave all your money away.
I gave all my money away. Got no more money.
That's
Yeah, we're
it.
done.
No more
Yeah.
money, and now you need a
Yeah,
liver
exactly.
transplant.
But so I was born with a liver disease, and I always knew I was going to have a transplant. It became more apparent at that time that it was necessary sooner rather than later. I was put on the list, but anyone who knows anything about organ donation knows it's very hard to get an organ off the list. Um, and so we proceeded with my dad being a candidate to donate part of his liver as a living donor. And he was a match, and so we had a date. It was going to be right after I finished my 5th grade year. And ahead of that time, and I was kind of doing this thing where I had sponsored Benit, and I had gotten a letter back, and I was feeling so good. And I was kind of moving into this time of my life where I was going to have this transplant. And I'd had surgeries growing up before, and I knew that you get a lot of teddy bears and a lot of things that you don't need. And so my idea was that I would ask for people who were, wanted to do something for me, for my family, to donate to support a larger project in one of the most highly affected areas by the AIDS epidemic at the time, which was in Musele, Zambia, instead of uh, giving me teddy bears, flowers, gifts, etc. So anytime they would feel bad for me, I would say, "No, no, don't give me anything. Please donate here." and
Wow.
and essentially, that's really what kickstarted the whole thing. I set up my first project with World Vision again, the organization I did the orphan sponsorship program with, and the annual budget for the project in Zambia was about $60,000. So I said, okay, that's my first goal. I'm going to raise $60,000. And my parents are like, how about, 3,000, like 2,000? I'm like, 60,000. And like throwing it down. And, meanwhile, I had that summer my first liver transplant, and then 5 weeks later, a second liver transplant. And while I was undergoing these transplants, I was kind of openly blogging about my experience. So we had set up this thing called a care page, which doesn't exist anymore because we have things like Facebook and blogs and Instagram and Twitter. What didn't exist at the time. And so it
Yeah.
was a way for me to update friends and family, and they would get email notifications that I posted an update, and then they could write back comments to me. So it was like truly before its time. And it was like just meant for people who are going through something medical. And so I would be blogging kind of about my experience and asking people to donate. And what happened was that people were taking my posts and sending it to their entire email contact lists. And so my posts were going viral in the kind of old internet way.
Wow,
And all of these
cool.
people all across the country started to donate to the project. And by the end of that summer, so I'd had 2 liver transplants in 5 weeks, and we'd raised about $20,000 of outright donations. And at that time, we then decided to kind of formalize the effort and applied to be a 501c3. And I wanted to call it Kids Caring for Kids because my whole vision was that no one was asking me for my money, and I was so mad about it. Like, no one thought that like it was important to tell me about this thing, about these kids who were my age, who were living with no parents because of a disease they had no control over. And so I just was so mad about it, and I wanted to tell all of my friends about it, and I wanted us to be kids who were caring for other kids who were then going to care for other kids around them. And so it was kind of just this
Wow.
whole pay it forward kind of concept, but also just this kind of step into youth kind of activism, which I think is like so prevalent today, but like wasn't really a thing when I was younger. And I was just so passionate about getting young people aware and involved to do something for other people. And so
Mm.
we formalized Kids Caring for Kids. It became a 501c3 about 6 months later. And the mission is to inspire and empower young people to help provide basic human needs to children living in sub-Saharan Africa. Um, yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
And it went really well. I mean, so, many years later, we've raised over $1 million, helped around 10,000 people in 4 different countries, working with local on the ground partners. We've built a high school. We've helped expand a K through 8th grade school, computer labs, clinics. Um, it's been it's been so incredible to kind of watch, and brought indoor plumbing to communities, feeding programs, orphan care centers, and all.
Have you been there to see all this
I
stuff
have,
too?
yes, yes. So it's a little bit tricky for me to visit projects because of my kind of ongoing health issues, but I have been able to
Mm.
go, and it was incredible because I think you can, for the first, well, it was like for the first 7 years of working on it, I just survived off of photos and stories because I just wasn't at the time where I was healthy enough to go. I take immune suppression, which every kind of post transplant patient does to make sure that we don't reject our organ. We take immune suppression, so we take a pill that every day that makes our immune system not work as well. So it's very
Is that for
yeah,
life?
unless you can wean off of it, but
Wow.
most people can't
They
really
don't.
wean off of it, but it's like this whole process. I'm now nearly 15 years post transplants, and I still take it.
Wow.
So yeah, which means I get infections easier, I get sick easier. It's harder for me to get over things, um, and yeah, it just makes you can get cancer more easily. It makes all
Mm.
sorts of things a little bit more complicated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but basically, Kids Caring for Kids to me was like this incredible thing because it allowed me to, I always say, exchange my sympathy currency for real change, right? Like
Mm.
I
I
was
love that.
always so inspired by Bono and what he's done in a lot of different ways, but specifically around the areas of extreme poverty. Um, and I like grew up listening to U2's music and was just like a really big fan. My whole
I should have put on you two
Yeah,
tonight, not Michael
exactly.
Jackson. Man, oh
Well,
man.
no, you
Sorry.
were good. And so he always talks about exchanging his rock star currency. And that I always found incredibly inspiring, because everyone has currency in their life. Everyone has some thing that they can exchange in for something else, like some reason that
Yeah.
people are listening to you, paying attention to you, caring about you, whether it's like you're a teacher in a classroom or you, I mean, everyone has influence in other people's lives. And for me, it was like I was getting a lot of sympathy from people, and I could exchange my sympathy for something that had nothing to do with me. I didn't have to be Kendall the
Yeah.
sick girl. I got to be Kendall the girl who wanted to help other people. And I
Hmm.
think the thing that I've learned the most about Kids Caring for Kids is that, in our weakest, most vulnerable times, we can actually be powerful, because we can be powerful for other people. And that's
Yeah.
a huge concept. Like, to me, it was life changing, because I had no control over my circumstance. And it was very, very challenging for many, many years. I struggled with complications for my second transplant for uh, like 12 years after. So just recently kind of have become more healthy than I've ever been in my entire life. But this concept that while I could not change my circumstances, I couldn't decide whether or not I was going to be, sick. I had no control over my body's circumstances, but I could be beneficial to other people. I could do something
Mm.
for other people. And I think that makes you feel significantly less powerless in your situation,
Yeah.
because, like, yeah, I can't do anything about my situation, but I could do something about yours. And everyone has that
Mm.
power. You don't have to be I speak a lot to kids, but you don't have to be like the popular kid at school. You don't have to be the smartest kid at school. You don't have to be the best athlete. You can be anyone. In fact, you can be sick and you can still be powerful. And I think that
Mm. Love that.
that's really what Kids Caring for Kids has taught me, because I was able to take this time of my life and have such a positive purpose, and a
Mm.
positive thing to focus on. And I think that really brought me and my family through all of the hard things.
Where does this compassion come from? I'm listening to you speak, and I kind of feel like, well, I mean, sometimes you can see, when you're scrolling through your social media feed, or you're reading, you're Googling, whatever it is, you can see there seems to be a lack of compassion in the
Mm.
world. People just don't care for other people like we used to. And I want to know where your compassion came from. Like, what was it inside of you that was like, I I can make a difference in someone else's life, and I'm going to do it? Because a lot of people have thoughts, they have these
Hmm.
ideas, they come and they
Hmm.
go, but you actually took action. You made a choice. You made a decision, to actually do something about this. Where does that come
Huh.
from?
Well, I think I was a little bit born with a extended sense of empathy, per se. I don't know. I think part of growing up feeling like an outsider or feeling different, I think, led me to feel a lot more attuned to other people's needs. I think I always felt different growing up, and so I always attracted people, or always was attracted to people who were also seemed different or seemed like the underdog. So
Mm.
stemming from even like my first grade class, when my teacher sat me next to, or sat the girl from the Czech Republic who didn't know a word of English next to me, because she knew that I was gonna like take care of her and help her. I think I always had a little bit of that sense, because I always felt different. And I think that a lot of people have that. Like, you just have to realize that everyone everyone has that something. Like, everyone has something inside of them that makes them feel sad or hurt or different or broken or bad, or less than,
Yeah.
right? And I just had the ability to identify that in other people, and I was attracted to it because I was so self-conscious about my own thing, that if I saw that in someone else, I was like, we can be friends because we're the same, even though if we're not the same
Yeah.
and our circumstances are different. But I thought I just was attracted to those kind of people. And I think I've had that kind of sense of empathy from a really young age because of the very strong feeling of feeling different. But I think that everyone grows up, right? And everyone eventually develops that feeling of feeling really different. And I think the other thing is just the lack of awareness of the fact that everyone else around you also feels the same way. And there's something inside of them that makes them feel different. And so I think the compassion thing is mostly like if you can tap into your own vulnerability, you suddenly can, if you can access that and you can face that and you can be comfortable enough with that, then you can see it in other people. And that if you
Yeah.
open up and you're vulnerable, other people open up too. And then you
Yeah.
learn, and I think it's just like a practice. It's a practice of like opening yourself up, and then other people open themselves up too, and then it's just proven time and time and time and time again in conversations with people and experiences with people that everyone's got something, and then you immediately begin to identify with them. And I think compassion comes from identification and understanding, right? And if once you kind of skim back all the packaging that we all have around who we are, right? Like our presentation, uh, our posturing, like whoever we pretend or act to be, if you can scrape all of those things away and get down to the true kind of core and vulnerability of who someone is, then you realize that like we all have the same feelings. Like we might have
Yeah.
vastly different experiences. I have a vastly different life experience than you, but we both understand what it feels like to be broken, sad, and lonely, scared,
Yeah.
anxious, whatever it is. And I think if you can tap into that kind of feeling of your own, then you can start to see it in other people.
Yeah, I agree. And part of this whole I Choose series, part of this whole campaign, I did a film a couple of years ago called The Human Experience, and it took me like 25 countries showing that film, screening different languages, different cultures. And it really kind of broke the barriers because in that film, it's really about like talking about these questions of like asking the questions of like who are we, what are we about? Um, I think that we kind of all want the same thing,
Hmm.
and I think that vulnerability is key. But in order to be vulnerable, I think the first step is that we have to be comfortable with who we are. You
Yeah.
know, we have to really be comfortable with who we are because that is the key to allowing us to be vulnerable to people first.
Sure, but I
You
think,
know,
a bit of it is just like a a bit of like bravery, right? Like just deciding that you're not gonna like be confined by this, like by the shackles of like keeping it all together all the time. Because
totally,
yeah,
totally.
and I don't think that I always feel 100% comfortable with myself, but I think that the thing is when I post something on Instagram that's really vulnerable about my life, or I share something that feels really scary to me, the thing is like people are A, attracted to vulnerability because they identify with it, and B, it's like
100%.
I think it's so much more powerful. Like if all you do is spend your time talking about just what everyone else is talking about, I think that we're just missing out on so many opportunities to have like meaningful impact in people's lives. And
Yeah.
and I'm driven by impact, right? So like, and I've always felt that way. And so, and I think that a little bit of that has to, comes from the idea that I never really knew how much time I was gonna have. Like, I grew up sick. Like, I grew up not necessarily always thinking that things were not always gonna go my way. And I think I always had an eye for, okay, I'm gonna just go all out here because if I have a limited time, like everything else gets kind of put into perspective, right? And I want to make
Yeah.
the biggest impact I can make in the shortest period amount of time. Like that includes being vulnerable, because being vulnerable, like I think, is the way to have like a meaningful impact on people's lives. I don't know. I mean, that's
No, I
been
agree
my
with you. I agree with
experience.
you.
But it takes
I agree
courage.
with
It
you.
takes so much
Vulnerability,
courage.
it takes courage, it takes bravery, and I think that it's also like a part of it is maybe it's not for you, but I know for a lot of people, they struggle with caring about what other people think
Oh,
of
I
them,
totally
which then,
care. I totally care.
yeah, I don't know. I'm at a new place in my life where I'm just like, I'm not caring
Yeah,
anymore.
I totally
I'm
care. I
not.
mean, the thing is, like, it's interesting because I actually think I've become better about choosing who I care, like, what they think about me. Like, I don't really care what strangers think about me. I care what, like, people I know and, like, people I am friends with think about me. And I think then if your friends, if you care mostly about what your friends think of you, then, like, I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't think I love my friends regardless of whatever whatever they do. Like, I don't really care. I just love them as people. And so if I have those
Yeah,
kinds of friends, then I shouldn't have to worry so much about that. But I mean, I think you're always trapped into worry. Look, I just started a new job. I totally care what everyone at that company thinks of me. I totally care. I totally care. But I also don't want to live a lie, right? Because that's
yeah,
not fun and
yeah.
that's too much stress. That's too much to live up to. So it's like kind of, I don't know. I think I'm never gonna master not caring fully about what people think
Mm.
of me.
That's something, honestly, that's something I'm working on like every single day.
Yeah,
Just caring less and less and less. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a healthy
right.
balance, like what you're saying, Like you don't care about what strangers think, but you have friends in your life who care about you and you care about them, and so it's like
Yeah, of course.
relationships. So they kind of keep you in check. I get that. I'm not like
Yeah, and I've
taking away
also
from
totally
that.
had people who like hate me for, doing a charity. Like growing up, I had plenty of kids who were mean to me for like doing something that was different. And at the end of the day, I go, I'm not doing this for them. I'm not doing this for them. Like why do I have to?
Yeah,
And yeah, it's not always easy, right? But I'm not living my life for other people because I get this one chance, right?
yeah,
So I think you just have to get to
yeah,
that point where you're fed up, and then I think
yeah.
it just kind of everything falls into perspective, right?
I think a lot of it comes from suffering too. The suffering
Sure.
is part of
Yeah.
it.
You're
It
like,
puts things
I'm
into
not going to make
perspective for
myself
sure.
suffer more, right?
Totally, without a doubt. Well, listen, you're talking about kids caring for kids, the non-for-profit that that you started at, was it 11 that
11.
you
Yeah,
started
yeah,
it?
yeah.
11 years old. Okay. And I mean, it's grabbed the attention of some people,
It
no?
has, yeah.
Do tell, do tell.
So it was about my freshman year of high school. We'd raised about I think like $120,000 from just fundraising efforts, all raised by kids. Um, it was about like the second week of my freshman year, and there was this big surprise assembly, and President Clinton showed up to my high school, and he had just written this book about giving and how anyone could make a difference. And so he shows up at my high school. I went to this big public high school, and we have this like huge assembly, and no one had any idea that he was going to be there. And he shows up and he starts talking about our school and how we're doing all this like giving stuff and volunteerism. And all of a sudden, he calls me out and calls me up on stage, which I had no idea about. I actually was very sick. I had like a super high fever that day, and I was almost not going to go to school because I wasn't at school the day before. And it was crazy because I was
Wow.
like, I don't know if I'm liver sick or if I'm regular sick. So it was wild. I had like 102-degree fever that whole day. And I went to school because my parents basically pushed me out the door. And first period, we had this big assembly, and I get called up on stage, and then he's telling everyone in my school. Of course, I didn't know, by the way, because I was a freshman, so I'd only known a very, small subsect of those people from middle school. And I was like, here's my chance. I'm going into high school. I get to make my own person. I could be whoever I want to be. And then all of a sudden,
And then the
it's
president come and screw
yeah,
that
he
all
did. He
up.
really did. And I'm standing up on that stage, and he's telling everyone what I've done with Kids Caring for Kids. And then I'm thinking to myself like, oh, I hope I get a homecoming date out of this. That was my like, very natural 14-year-old girl brain was like, take me to
Yeah.
homecoming, boys, you know. Um, and then he announces that he's gonna take me down with him to be on the Oprah show. So we drove down in a presidential motorcade, and then I was on the show with President Clinton. So I was like sitting between
Wow.
President Clinton and Oprah. It was pretty weird. And
Yeah. And you're 14
I
at the
was
time.
14, and
We're gonna find. Can we find that on YouTube? Can I
you
find that
can,
somewhere?
yeah.
We
So
can.
so
All
you
right.
can
We're gonna.
find
Somebody's gotta
you can
find
find
that,
clips.
and we gotta put that in the
Yeah, you can
comments.
find so I was on Oprah's Where Are They Now, which is a show that they do on Oprah's network where they re-talk to guests in their past. And so that's where you can find parts of the original story is in the YouTube Oprah Where Are They Now clip that I'm in.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, and they did that when I was in college, I
Incredible.
guess. But yeah, so what was incredible about that was that it totally exploded the organization. We went from this like
Yeah, I'm
basement
sure.
organization, literally like t-shirts in my basement, to this like very internationally known thing. And I got requests from all over the world, and to like speak and to do this and that and whatever. And my parents pretty much like shielded me from a lot of it, I think, because they were like, you're going to be a normal kid. But what it really did was like totally blow up the organization, and we raised so much money. And someone on the show who was traveling with President Clinton donated $500,000 right on the show. So
Wow.
immediately kind of we like had to kind of figure out okay, like now we have so much money and we can fund all of these different kinds of things. Like, what are we going to go do? And we, took a little bit of time to kind of focus inward on just creating some kind of like uh, substance around the organization. I mean, it was really just like me and my mom and my dad, like just kind of figuring out what we were doing as we were doing it. Um, and neither one of my parents, I think, really ever imagined or envisioned them getting involved in this kind of a thing, in the sense that like they just had no idea about any of this, and they just kind of fell into it because they couldn't really say no to a sick kid. And so I
Wow.
think it was just this total kind of weird thing where we were just learning as we were going, and that was a super exciting time, and I learned so much. I think I learned more than I probably even realized today about just how to run things, how to start things, how to raise money, how to tell stories that impact people, which is like great because that's still what I do today. In my like day job, um, I get paid to tell stories that impact people, which is great because that's all I love doing. And Yeah, it's interesting because it was like one heart action that led into something that was so much bigger than I had ever intended. And that's why I always tell people when they're like thinking about trying to do something for someone else, they want to get involved in something, and they go, oh, I just need to start this organization, I need to do all these things, and I'm like, no, just start with one thing, like just donate
Yeah.
whatever to some organization or go volunteer somewhere. You never know what that's going to lead you to. I had no
Yeah.
intention of starting a nonprofit that would, raise money and get involved in all these different programs. And, I just had no idea that was going to, I mean, I was 11. Of course I had no idea.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that like, you just take the next step, like just one foot in front of the other, and another step and another step. And I still have to tell myself this today. I have to remind myself all of these lessons that I learned when I was 11. I have to remind myself now that I'm an adult, because I think when you're 11, the world is simple, right? You don't
Mm.
see the limits that we see when we're adults. You grow
Yeah.
up and you become jaded, and you're like, well, why even bother doing something because the problem is so huge. I'm not going to make an
Yeah.
impact, or this is, I just think that we get so polluted with all of this kind of stuff, that this garbage that doesn't really matter, and a lot of this doubt, and a lot of this just like jadedness, right? This just skepticism. And I think like I always have to remind myself, even today, when I'm thinking about getting involved in something or doing something, and I get caught in that train of thought, like, no, no, just one thing. You just do one good thing. And then the next day,
Yeah.
you do another thing. And it doesn't even have to be the
Yeah.
next day. Like, who knows? Like, it's 3 months from now, it's 4 months from now, another thing comes your way. I think so much about Kids Caring for Kids was like feeling a call, answering the call, and then just walking through whatever doors were put in my path. And I really feel in a lot of ways like that what happened with that organization happened like to me, rather I happened to it. And I think
Yeah. Are you still running the organization
yeah, I
now?
mean, so it's now been adopted by a larger organization that was one of our partners for a really long time, called Life Song for
Hmm.
Orphans. And so they're actually a partner we've had for about like 7 years now. And so we worked with them in Kitwe, Zambia, and loved our experience working with them so much that they have now adopted Kids Caring for Kids as its kids branch. And I kind of just act as an advisor, which is nice because I think, when I started something when I was 11, I never kind of had any idea of what it would become. And then it became this thing that I didn't know if I wanted to do full time in my life. But I still
Yeah.
wanted to be involved, and I still thought it was meaningful. But I just also wanted to pursue these other things that I really cared about. And so it became this really kind of complicated thing where after I graduated college, it was like, okay, well, I just knew I needed to find a home for it that would care for it, and that I could be a part of it, and that I could trust, and that it could still continue to inspire people, but it didn't have to be exactly what it was. It could just be what it like it is now, right? And
Mm.
so I find it like just great that it can be what it is, and I can be involved in it, and it can continue to help people, and that's all I really care about. And I also can go out and explore all the other things that I am interested in.
Man, oh man, I love that. We are coming to the end here of our show. Um, Man, I just want to know, like, Kendall, from all of this experience that you have, what would you say is one of the most, and then when I say all this experience, I mean the non-for-profit, working with other people, helping other people, your own
Illness, yeah, yeah, yeah.
trauma that you've been
hmm
through, what is it that stands out as the biggest lesson?
Um, hmm, it's a good question. I
I try to make them good.
think I kind of said it before. I think it's like we can be powerless, but we can actually be powerful. Like, I just always really was interested in taking that concept of like, who is powerless? Like, and what does that actually look like to be powerless? Because I don't actually think that it really exists. Um, I don't
Mm,
actually think that you're ever powerless, because again, you have that ability to be powerful for other people, and that to me is like real power. I think that power is something that's so corrupted these days, and it's because it's not for other people, right? It's like power for yourself is different. It's like we have to tap into our own powerlessness to be powerful for other people, and I don't think that leaders do that today. I think that leaders think
mm,
that they have to be powerful themselves, and I actually think
mhm,
it's the opposite. In order to be powerful for other people, you have to be powerless. You have to tap into that vulnerability. You have to tap into that pain. You have to be open and honest and brave in order to help other people. Because if you can't feel it yourself, you can't really help other people that are facing something like that. I think that we have to like be able to access that pain, and be brave enough
mm.
to do it, to do that work.
Yeah, That's pretty deep. Um, yeah,
And I
that's pretty
also
deep.
just think at the end of the day, I mean, I'm a person of like faith and I believe in God, and I think like for me it's like God can dream a bigger dream than you ever would have imagined yourself. Like I don't have I never imagined what my life would be. I never imagined what Kids Caring for Kids could be. I was just an 11-year-old who wanted to do something for other people, and I
Mm,
was facing something really scary myself, and I was, just I just felt like that was what God wanted for me, and I followed it. And I think, like, I just consistently go back to that in my own life to say, like, you know, you might not be able to make sense of everything now, and you might not have faith right now, but like I look back and I go, if that's not proof that God can do powerful things in any person's life, God can use any human being. If me as an 11-year-old in the hospital, like I mean, almost dying, right? Like a really severe complication
yeah.
that I had between my transplants, I just think like if that can happen, and I can go out and do something for other people and help all of these other people, because I'm like that's God. Like there's something there. If God can tap into someone like me, someone who is sick, someone who is young, someone who is a kid, right? Like all of these portrayals of what being weak is, then like it can happen for anyone. God can use anyone. And I think that
Mm,
like if I'm honest with myself, like, and if I'm being truly honest with you guys, I mean, I think everyone can have their own faith beliefs, and that's great. Like for me, this is what I believe, and I think that that's the real lesson that I keep going back to.
Thanks everybody for listening to the I Choose Series podcast. If you guys are not already following the Facebook and Instagram I Choose series, that's the best place to find out all that's going on with I Choose. And we are very, very excited to have you listening. So hope you might share this with your friends and your family, anyone you think that would get some value from this. It's all about making a choice and reminding us that we are the lead in our life story. Thanks for listening.